In Magic there are many cards that are ridiculously overpowered yet considered underwhelming and undesirable because of their extreme conditionality. Then again, when you're playing a 4-player EDH game with your friends, you usually know what to expect, especially when you've played against their deck before and you know which commander you're going to play against now. This is a list of top 10 obscure cards that are ridiculously powerful against the foe you know. Number 10. Faces of the Past. Whenever a creature dies, tap all untapped creatures that share a creature type with it, or untap all tapped creatures that share a creature type with it. This is a card that all tribal players love. Whether you're going against an elf deck, merfolks, dragons, angels, demons, minotaurs, you name it, this is the enchantment you want on the table. Easily shuts down a Kalia deck and basically anything that benefits from having the same creature type on the battlefield. One of them goes down and just like that they're all tapped so your opponent can't block. Number 9 we have Song of Serenity from Exodus. Creatures that are enchanted can't attack or block. Incredibly powerful against aura decks, this card is the kryptonite for Bruna deck aficionados. Alternatively, you can also pack some creature enchantments of your own in your deck to use them strategically. To use, for example, your Rancor as a green pacifism. Number 8 is the bane of multicolored decks and a friend to monocolored green commanders, Primal Order. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, Primal Order deals damage to that player equal to the number of non-basic lands they control. When you're playing mono green with just forests as your land base, this can become really effective. Imagine your foe playing with Sliver Queen as their commander, and each and every one of their lands is something non-basic. Even if it's 3 to 5 lands for each of your 3 opponents, that's 9 to 15 damage you're dealing each turn to them. Another great thing about this card is it's not that intimidating, so most players would just suck up the 4 damage each turn instead of using up their removal spell, especially when others are getting hit by it as well. A pretty old rare from 1995 Homelands, and it had a reprint in 5th edition, a magnificent relic of the olden days that rewards you for playing basics and punishes your opponents for playing non-basics. But not as hard as number 7. Destructive Flow. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-basic land. If you have black, red, and green in your commander's identity, yet you still rely on basics, this enchantment from Planeshift becomes a devastating force against your opponents. Each and every turn means a land fewer. You, on the other hand, can rely on artifacts and creatures for mana aside from your basics. But what if you're the one playing non-basic against those pesky mono-green forest decks or Torbran and their all lands or basic mountains decks? Number 6. Mask of Intolerance from Apocalypse is the way to go. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, if there are 4 or more basic land types among lands that player controls, Mask of Intolerance deals 3 damage to that player. This is a 2-mana artifact. You can play it casually with the mana left over from casting other things. It's in no way intimidating and seems really weak if you think about it. That's its strength, actually. Most players don't really find it a threat because 3 damage isn't something you should be prioritizing for removal. That's up to 9 damage per turn against all your opponents, and 5 turns later it's 15 for each, for a total of 45 damage with this silly, weak artifact costing only 2 mana. Number 5. Chaos One. 4 mana and tap. Target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery card. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then put the exiled cards that weren't cast this way on the bottom of that library in a random order. Many viewers probably remember the shenanigans this card was able to do while in Standard a few years ago. Although pricey when it comes for the mana cost to use and seemingly chaotic, it's not as chaotic and random as you'd think. In Commander you know which players have the heavy hitter instants and sorceries, which ones probably have some kind of removal or wipes, And this isn't a single-use artifact. If you fail to grab something spectacular with it, you can use it again later for the same cost. Also, this is an amazingly versatile card that can be used for control, for example when you wait to use it until your opponent's turns when they cast their spells, which you can counter with a blue player's counterspell if there's someone who relies on those heavily. Too chaotic for you? What about if you could tutor any opponent's deck for any card you want and play it? If that's how you roll, number 4 Grinning Totem makes it possible. 2 mana and tap, sacrifice Grinning Totem. Search target opponent's library for a card and exile it. Then that player shuffles. Until the beginning of your next upkeep, you may play that card. At the beginning of your next upkeep, if you haven't played it, put it into its owner's graveyard. This old card from Mirage might cost 4 mana, then 2 to activate, then requires you to pay the mana cost of the spell you're getting with it. But if you play it on one turn, then activate on another, that's only 2 mana extra to the spell. The downside? Unlike Chaotic Wand, it's single use and you need to sacrifice it. But you're getting any card you want from your opponent's decks. Hopefully you're enjoying this video so far. This is the first video like this I've done, so be sure to post some constructive criticism in the comments to tell me whether or not you'd like more like these and what I should improve. Also, you might consider subscribing to my channel for more and giving this video a like if you find it helpful. But without further ado, here's number 3, Zora's Weirding. Players play with their hands revealed. If a player would draw a card, they reveal it instead. Then any player may pay 2 life. If a player does, put that card into its owner's graveyard. Otherwise, that player draws a card. An effective showstopper for when you're far ahead and don't want your opponents to draw more answers. This is a blue card, and with blue you can draw a lot of cards, especially later in the game when there's so much mana available. Your opponents don't necessarily have the means to do the same, so while everyone is being shut down, you can still attempt to outdraw them if they're low on life points. It's even more viable if you're playing a Dimir deck with a lot of cards that can be cast from your graveyard, and it doesn't make a difference if you discard them or play them from your hand. Number 2, Hum of the Radix. Each artifact spell costs 1 mana more to cast for each artifact its controller controls. This is the ultimate card you want to play against that friend who runs an artifact-heavy deck. Although there isn't many decks in Commander that would swarm you with artifact creatures and all kinds of cheap artifacts, it doesn't mean there aren't any. Keep in mind that treasures are also artifacts, and having a lot of them on the table is going to prevent their owner from playing those high-cost artifacts unless enough of them get sacrificed first. Put this in an elf deck with tons of mana, and the high casting cost of disenchantment from Mirrodin won't really be an issue. Number 1, Cultural Exchange. Choose any number of creatures target player controls, choose the same number of creatures another target player controls. Those players exchange control of those creatures. This effect lasts indefinitely. While blue has a lot of ways to gain control of your opponent's creatures, this card is special. Not only can you use it to trade your creatures, you can also keep yours and make 2 of your opponents trade theirs. Imagine one of them running an elf deck, the other a merfolk deck. Trade their creature pumpers and the elf army doesn't get those +1/+1 counters from Elvish Champion and Impervious Perfect. They're just basic weaklings now, with Merfolk Mistbinder and Merfolk Sovereign. Same with the Merfolk army, dropping down in power, and the heavy hitter can no longer become unblockable with the Sovereign currently serving another player. You could also trade some of your tokens for powerful creatures, and how about trading those creatures you only have on the board until the end of turn? The possibilities are limitless and the outcome incredibly fun. This was the 10 card your EDH group will hate you for playing part 1. Be sure to tell me if you like this format and if I should make a part 2. Be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying my content, and we'll meet in another video.